Everyone, let's talk about Bitcoin and income inequality. Well, the first thing to understand about income inequality is actually central banks are the primary thing that drives income inequality. And the reason for that is when central banks do their money printing, which is what they specialize in, when central banks do their money printing, the people that it hurts the most are the people that live on cash and save in cash. So if you think about this, if you are middle or high income, you can afford assets rather than savings. And with assets, if you can own property or a house or stocks or something like that, then when the government prints more money, the value of your assets tends to go up while the purchasing power of your dollars goes down. But if most of your net worth is in assets rather than in cash, it hurts you a lot less than the people who have most of their assets in cash. So if you think about it, the people who are hurt most by central government money printing are the people who have the least assets. And those with the least assets are typically sitting on cash and they're trying to save up in cash, but the harder they try to save in cash, that cash continues to lose value. And most of the places around the world, the money they use is much higher inflation than the US dollar. So the US dollar inflation is typically between 4% and 7%. And it's actually higher than that if you adjust it to measure it the way a more fair measurement than the government uses. But by the government's measure, it's usually in the ballpark of at least 3%, if not sort of 4% to 9%. But in a lot of parts of the world, inflation is 40%, 50%, 100%, meaning your money's losing value at a rate of, a couple percentage points a week. So imagine how hard it is to get out of poverty when you never have enough money to buy an asset that you can then store your value in that asset. So Bitcoin fixes that because Bitcoin is an asset that can be purchased for any amount of money, unlike property. So for real estate, you typically have to have a sizable amount of money to buy real estate because you can't buy real estate in the square inch or the square foot. For example, you typically need to buy real estate in the form of a house or a plot of land or something that has some meaningful scale. So as middle and upper income people can afford houses and plots of land and buildings and things like that. Poor people can't. And so rich and middle and upper income people have an ability to shield themselves from inflation in a way that others do not have the ability to. Okay, so what about internet access specifically? Is there a way to which Bitcoin disadvantages those without internet access? So a couple thoughts. One, in order to use Bitcoin, you don't have to have internet access all the time. You just have to have internet access or some sort of cellular access while you're transacting. But even if you live in a very remote part of the world where you're only able, you've got, even in the poorest parts of the world, you can get your hands on some sort of a phone of some sort. And Bitcoin can actually work with just a regular cell phone. You can actually do Bitcoin transactions on a regular cell phone, even though in the Western world, everybody uses a smartphone. You can make it work on a regular, effectively a dumb phone. But if you think about it, it can be as simple as somebody going sort of into town or down the mountain to a village that has a satellite internet connection on Starlink, which is pretty much universal now, Elon Musk's internet network, and they can save in Bitcoin. And, every week or two or three or five, they can go and they can buy a little bit more Bitcoin, and that Bitcoin will always be waiting for them. And anytime that they want to cash in on it, to start a business or buy a piece of property like a house or something like that, that Bitcoin is waiting for them. So Bitcoin is the great equalizer as it comes to income inequality. And fiat currencies, fiat meaning made up currencies like the US dollar that are not backed by anything, are the greatest driver of income inequality because again, they debase and devalue the money that the poor are using while inflating the value of assets like real estate and stocks. And so, again, if you have real estate and stocks, then you ride the wave of the inflation up because the inflation carries the value of your assets up as well. Not as well as, something like Bitcoin would, but it's still much better than if you're living paycheck to paycheck, or if all you have is cash under your mattress and the government's constantly devaluing your cash. In a world with universal Starlink and universal technological access, I don't think there's a single place on the entire planet where Bitcoin is not a better savings technology than their next best alternative. Because their next best alternative is probably their local currency, and their local currency is probably inflating by 50 to 100% a year. So if it seems bad that, well, not everybody has universal access to, to internet. First, it does not have to be high speed. Bitcoin does not need high speed internet. For a smartphone, it just needs any internet. Literally the slowest, slow internet. Even satellite internet works totally fine for Bitcoin. And you can even use it on a phone with just cellular and no internet access. So Bitcoin can do more for the world to eliminate income inequality than honestly any other technology I've ever encountered. It could do more for income inequality than the best efforts on even education, because education is just so hard to get to the people who need it, and it is so expensive to get to the people who need it. So certainly you could use things like education to help eliminate income inequality, but it's not as effective, universal, and high leverage as people switching to a Bitcoin standard as far as income inequality. And as far as income inequality as well, the fastest thing we can do to lower income inequality is get more people on Bitcoin. The faster that poor people adopt Bitcoin, the sooner they can insulate themselves from inflation. And the good news for Bitcoin is there's a lot of rich people on Wall Street that are skeptical of it still, even with as much adoption as there's been. So it's a unique opportunity for people who historically have always been front run by Wall Street to be the ones front running Wall Street this time, which again does a lot to reverse income inequality as well. So hope that helps on that front. Hopefully I'll